Welcome. Happy Friday. Good afternoon to folks on the East Coast. Good morning to folks on the West Coast. So excited that you're here. We'll give folks a few moments to join. Let me just make sure. I should have done this already. I did just turn the chat on. So while we're waiting, if you could just drop in the chat where you're joining from. It's always fun to see. Shauna is here from Atlanta, another Atlanta, Portland. Hi, Christy. Some familiar names here. It's fun to see. Oh, wow. Can't keep up. Awesome. Great representation here. Looks like the number of participants has flattened off a bit. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. Welcome to this panel discussion today. Very excited. My name is Michael. I will be your host. Our topic of discussion today is rethinking if therapists don't take insurance, they don't care about access. And so we won't be talking about whether therapists should take insurance or not, which I wanted to set that expectation here. But really, this narrative that if therapists don't take insurance, they don't care about being accessible. And we're going to dive into that. We're also going to talk about some alternative models of offering therapy in an accessible way outside of the insurance versus cash pay binary. So just a couple of housekeeping items, and then I'll turn it over to our panelists. The first is that this is a webinar format, so your cameras are off. So don't worry about that. It's a question that we get every time we do one of these. However, the chat is turned on, and it's fun for us to hear from the live audience. And so please use the chat throughout. And then I'm going to make sure that our Q&A is on as well. Great. So please use the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Makes it a lot more engaging for us. If you do have a question, please navigate over to the Q&A and ask it in the Q&A. If you ask a question in the chat, it's just going to get lost. If you go to the Q&A and someone has already asked a question, you're able to give it a thumbs up. So please just upvote, thumbs up the questions that you want answered. And at the end, we'll save time to do that. Finally, this is being recorded. I'll probably say that a few times because people always ask. If you have to jump off, don't worry, we'll email you the recording. Great, so now let's meet our panelists today. I'm going to have Sanjana, you go first. Would love to hear your name, where you're based, and a little bit about the company that you're here representing.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Great to be here. I'm Sanjana. I'm in Sacramento right now, and I am the co-founder of Thrizer. So Thrizer, just in a nutshell, helps make out-of-network benefits more transparent and accessible so that clients can access them, and also provides another way that they can save money on therapy.
Thanks for being here, Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Fugelsang. Excuse me. I'm the founder and director of Open Path Psychotherapy Collective. We're a nationwide nonprofit that helps connect people who are either uninsured or underinsured. Um, and I'm also in private practice and have been for about 20 years. And I don't have a ton of knowledge about the insurance industry, except to say that I uh, created this organization to help people who were uninsured or underinsured. And I've been taking insurance for about 14 years as a therapist.
Thank you, Paul. Paul is very humble, undersells himself in terms of his expertise. So he does have a lot to offer. Excited that you're here, Paul. Megan.
Hey, yeah, I'm Megan Cornish. I'm in Richmond, Virginia. I am a licensed clinical social worker, but I have not been in practice for several years. Instead, I have been working with all sorts of companies in the mental health tech space and professionally causing trouble as a good social worker should. Just talking about all the interesting dynamics and who gets squeezed and left out in the systems. So right now I'm representing Aaliyah, who's trying to build a workable model to increase reimbursements for therapists by negotiating higher rates based on aggregated outcome data. So they do that with free platform, and then certain individuals will be eligible to join the network when it launches to get those higher rates. So we can talk about that more later, but that's who I'm representing today.
Definitely we'll get into these various models. Excited to dive into that. Before we do, we're talking about access. And so the first question that I would like to pose to the group is, do therapists in private practice in particular have a responsibility to be accessible to clients? And maybe Paul, I'll start with you because I know you have some thoughts on this topic.
Um, philosophically speaking, I think that therapists and people in general have a responsibility to be true to themselves and how they're feeling and how they want to be in the world. And it sort of begins and ends there. Now, if I had my druthers, if I could get a few wishes, that one of them would be that therapists would really concern themselves with this. I wish that people in all healing professions would really concern themselves with this as well. And for me, it doesn't really come from a place of shoulds. Um, Again, people get to do what they want to do in this world, and I would hope that people feel like accessibility is an important issue for them.
Megan?
Yeah, so I can mostly speak from my experience in grad school and my professional code of ethics. I know that social workers tend to have more of a active stance on these issues, and our code of ethics does say a lot about access and how we help clients navigate kind of that framework. What it doesn't say is we are obligated to accept insurance to do it, to make sure that clients have access. I think that probably insurers benefit from the implied assumption that that's what access means. It doesn't mean that though. So
Sanja, I'm curious what Thriser's position on this topic is.
Yeah, I think I mean, I agree with everyone, everyone's viewpoints. That the alternative perspective here is if accessibility is important to you as a clinician, then it shouldn't come at the cost of your own well-being, right? And I think it's often an either or. And to Megan's point, when insurance is equated with being accessible, a lot of people may find that they are not able to support their own well-being, right? So in an ideal world, it wouldn't be an either or, right? It's like you want to be accessible and you're able to support your family and yourself financially and your mental health and well-being and all of that. But often that doesn't happen. And the proxy becomes you pick one and we label people based on what camp they end up picking, basically. Right. And so I think that's where for Thrizer, I guess, like we are, if you want to be out of network and you want to be a private pay provider, that's fine. Right. If you want to accept insurance, that's fine too. Let's find other ways to get to accessibility that isn't putting people in buckets based on like whether they accept insurance or not.
Yeah, one kind of narrative that I hear is, well, why don't we hold doctors, why don't we hold lawyers to the same standard of accessibility? Is it because therapy as a helping profession is, primarily female dominated? Is that why there's this expectation kind of accessibility? And I'm curious if anyone wants to take that one. I know that's a bit, a bit of a loaded question, but curious to hear any thoughts from the group on that.
yeah, I know you know this, but I recently got into that whole dynamic in a Substack article. The question being who gets the money when you don't do it for the money. And yeah, it definitely inordinately impacts female dominated professions. My husband's in nursing, so we've seen that in his career as well, as opposed to the doctors that he worked with. And in fact, he recently became a nurse anesthetist, which is the only nursing specialty that is male dominated and also happens to be the highest paid nursing specialty. So we were talking about that the other day. But I've seen even doctors kind of have knee-jerk reactions when we talk about this, in LinkedIn spaces, especially. I think I saw a doctor say, your rates are unreasonable. I can give someone a full hour of my time for $100 an hour, and you should not charge more than that. And when I asked him, well, that's your initial 1 hour intake session, how long does your follow-up sessions for that same rate take? There was no response because their sessions, their treatments usually take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and they're able to see multiple. But our rates represent our rates for the entirety of our of the care process. So it's really kind of a different formula that gets put in for therapy.
Yeah, and I wanted to add here. The question's interesting, Michael, because I don't think it's that the others are not in helping professions or that they're female dominated or whatever. The incentive to service provided is better than it is within the therapy world, right? If we're talking about doctors specifically, the insurance reimbursement rates are way higher and comparable to kind of the service that they are providing. If we're talking about lawyers or anyone else, the pay that they are getting is respective or respectful of the education and the work that they have put in to becoming that profession, right? And we don't see the same in therapy. And that's the issue. So if we were in a system where the incentives were better aligned with what someone should be paid for, I don't think we'd be having this conversation right now. I think it's because we exist in an insurance system that doesn't support therapists that we are even trying to build these organizations around this failing system to see how we can help pockets of people still, make a living, or be able to help clients, right? So I think it's more about the industry and the lack of support that insurance companies, which happens to be the same backbone for doctors, isn't supporting therapists. So yeah.
Paul, anything there just to close us out as a therapist in private practice who does take insurance?
Yeah, I mean, I guess building off of that, it seems that there's a flaw in the premise of the question was my original response because
Mhm.
by and large doctors do take insurance, right? They are
Right.
concerned with accessibility. But to Sanjana's point, it feels a little bit misleveled in how it's distributed.
Sure. Yeah, it's like again, it comes back to that binary, right? I think you lose the nuance in these conversations. It's like, well, we don't hold them to this accountability, this sort of standard of accessibility. Why do we hold therapists? And it's like, well, it's complicated, right? And there's layers to it. Yes, Megan.
I also think we can't really compare therapists to doctors without talking about parity. I pulled a few stats that I thought was important for this conversation, and I'm glancing at it. And did you know that mental health claim denial rates are 85% higher than for doctors? So, insurance wants us to feel good about taking insurance, but they don't feel very good about paying for our services. So it's definitely kind of a different formula there as well.
So,
Yeah, and we love stats around here. The other thing is, I was just curious about, okay, like if a clinician accepts United Healthcare and they're credentialed, right, with United Healthcare, um, of course there's variability based on in-network insurance rates, etc. But what I found in my research was that on average, a 90837 is reimbursed about $120 if we're talking within even like Alma and Headway, like the big tech companies, right, that are negotiating rates. Now, I did some this basic math, right? And Megan, Paul, I'd love to kind of lean on you guys in terms of like actually, practicing clinicians. How many clients can a clinician, a therapist actually see in a week while supporting themselves and doing all the administrative burden and things and all that comes?
Uh,
Ballpark answers.
but
I'll let you answer that when you're actually practicing.
I mean, it really depends on the person's capacity. Uh,
Yeah.
one of my best friends is a colleague, and he sees 40 some clients a week, and he's able to
Mhm.
do that, and he's good with that. I could not do that. I couldn't come close to that.
Yeah.
20 clients to me, probably, I don't see that many because of my job with Open Path, but 20 clients to me feels like a sweet spot.
Yeah, yeah. And I was using 20 kind of as a ballpark. I know, thanks for chiming in the chat around 15 to 25. Let's do some math, right? Basically, if we get 120 reimbursement for 20 clients a week, let's say you take 2 weeks off that you're not working, right? That's 50 weeks. That's 120K. And that is absurd. because one, of course, that's not enough to actually support yourself, right? And two, obviously there's variability based on geography. And more than that, it's just kind of offensive to all the work that you put into being a clinician in the first place. And so again, I think until the reimbursement rates, the claim denial rates, and the administrative burden is fixed for insurance for therapists, I think it's unsustainable, honestly, to be able to accept insurance for everyone, right? If we're saying this insurance is something that works for everyone, it won't work for everyone.
Absolutely. And I think something that's also important to mention here is that, if you look at insurance reimbursement rates in more rural areas, you're looking at like 55, 60, $70 a session, right? Like 120 would be great for some of those places versus like a San Francisco or New York. But also again, like $120,000 a year in New York City or San Francisco, like it's gonna, with such a high cost of living, right? Um, I do want to ask this question. So this narrative, take insurance or you don't care about access, why does that continue to persist and who does it actually serve? And Megan, maybe we'll start with you. I think we've touched on this a little bit, but curious your any thoughts that you have.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to watch the conversations unfold. I spend a lot of my time kind of lurking in therapist spaces just to see what's going on. Um, I notice that often the knee-jerk reaction, even if it's said kindly, when someone says that they are all private pay when they share their rates, is is to say something, or at least, hint something about access. And while I think it's important to care about access for clients, obviously, and I do think that there are therapists who probably could stand to, if not lower their rates, make some space for some sliding scale clients. I hate that we feed into that the dichotomy um, that really only benefits the profit margins of insurance. I think that this vague sense of guilt around access as well um, keeps us from seeing alternative uh, options.
Sanjana and Paul, anything to add there? Any thoughts?
I would say I agree with the last point, Megan, that you made around when you feel like you are stuck in a system, um, that's what causes helplessness, right? And insurance companies are the ones who benefit from us feeling stuck in a system. And yeah, so it basically just comes down to that.
Great.
I don't have that
Oh,
much more to offer except to say that it really seems like when humans are stressed out about something, they look for scapegoats and they like shaming.
yeah. I'd love to transition the conversation here to probably why most folks are here, and that's diving into alternative models beyond this in-network, out-of-network binary. And maybe, Paul, we could start with you. Can you share a little bit about how offering, a sliding scale can increase access to therapy, and then how OpenPath helps to kind of facilitate that process for therapists?
Sure. I want to be clear that I didn't start OpenPath as an alternative to the insurance agency. I started it just to the insurance industry. I
Sure.
started it just to try to meet a need of people who were falling through the cracks, because as a clinician, I could see that happening. Um, in terms of what we do, we invite therapists to come on board our collective, and we have about 37,000 therapists right now. And we ask them to see one or two clients for a rate that ranges between 40 and $70 an hour. And we keep it at one or two because we really do see it as an altruistic act. We don't really want therapists trying to fill their caseload with open path clients, because it sort of defeats the purpose of encouraging a healthier system. What we really want is for therapists to see one or two and just to make a small dent in the the wide scale inequity that exists in the system.
For therapists who are here, whether live or tuning in, and they're unsure about how to kind of navigate these conversations around a sliding scale, for example, like does a client qualify for a sliding scale, or how much should I charge? How would you advise those folks?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing I've really seen is that so many therapists don't really know how to talk with their clients about money. And it's not the therapist's fault. It's probably the fault of the training they received. But money is such an important conversation. So we do try to encourage therapists, and we have some materials to help them along with talking with their clients about money because it feels like a crucial thing. And what we do is we sort of do all the data collection for the therapist. We come up with their financial information that we then share with the therapist, and then ask the therapist to have a negotiated rate between 40 and 70. Therapists don't always do that. Sometimes they'll just choose a number between 40 and 70, and that's what they work with.
Megan?
Paul, do you have numbers on like how many clients they take on average and how many are private pay versus they take insurance outside of OpenPath?
I have numbers that I could probably dig up from
Oh,
2018.
good.
Um,
I'm
some,
just curious, like
uh,
who's the
I'm not sure. Sometimes we'll dig in and we will see that someone has really, oftentimes therapists who are starting their practice will rely on us more heavily because $50 an hour is better than $0 an hour. So we don't cap people. If they're taking seven, they're going to take seven. But again, we really encourage one or two.
yeah, that makes sense.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Sanjay, talk about out of network billing, just kind of at a high level, kind of if you could share how, how it works and how it is able to increase access to, to therapy without the therapist having to, make less money.
Yeah. So, out-of-network benefits are basically benefits that exist in a client's insurance plan. These benefits are largely present in PPO plans. There's some non-PPO plans that also have out-of-network benefits. And it basically provides them a form of, an avenue of reimbursement, even if their clinician doesn't accept insurance, right? And what's interesting about this from the data that we've collected, at least, is the reimbursement rates tend to be higher when a client submits a super bill, which is basically saying, hey, like I've seen a clinician out of pocket, than contracted rates that clinicians get in network. And that's crazy. But what that is, it's good news, is that as a clinician, you can charge the rate that you want, you set the rate, and clients can so submit a super bill and be able to get some percentage of their reimbursement back, right? It will still be higher than what they would pay as an in-network copay. Like, I don't want to equate the two. It will still be higher out of pocket for a client, but it kind of finds that balance of, okay, clinicians able to support themselves and find a caseload that's manageable. Client is able to meet them a little bit closer and say, hey, I'm okay paying maybe $60 more per session, versus if I was seeing an in-network provider. And so yeah, I think out-of-network benefits definitely should be something that every clinician, especially if you're private pay, should be looking into and talking about with your clients. And then kind of helping them through, whether it's by automating out-of-network billing, by providing them with super bills, connecting them with resources, to be able to make that process easier and simpler for clients.
And how does Thrizer help to streamline that process for therapists?
Yeah, so we found that, myself and Ronak, the co-founders of Thrizer, are longtime therapy goers. So we've been going to therapy for a really long time, and we've always seen out-of-network providers. And so we have kind of firsthand experience in trying to submit super bills and failing and not having any kind of, feedback on where is my claim? How much am I going to get back? Like, so Thriver was born out of frustration, I would say, that like if we are feeling this way, then like a lot of clients are also feeling this way. And so what Thrizer aims to do is kind of eliminate three big kind of, I guess, friction points along the way. One is claim submission, so automating claim submission. The first step, of course, in accessing your out-of-network benefits as a client is to request a super bill and submit that super bill to your insurance. That process itself is very clunky. So, do I submit it on my insurance portal? Do I fax it in? Do I email it in? Like, that is kind of variability that exists within insurance plans, and it's very difficult to even get started. Or, clients might just forget, they're overwhelmed with life already. They're like, they don't believe in the institution of insurance. They're like, I don't want to work so hard. It's probably going to get denied anyway, right? So claim submission, we automate that. So as soon as, a clinician uses Thrizer, they're automating the claim submission aspect so they don't have to worry about that. The second thing is claim management, which is actually managing the claims. Again, when a client submits a super bill, there's no online portal where they can track their status, right? Usually, what it comes down to is I need to call my insurance company and be like, hey, it's been 6 weeks. Where's my reimbursement? Have you seen my claim come through? When am I going to get my check, right? So it's very kind of hands-on for the client. And so Thrizer takes on managing all of that. We contact insurance, we get the claim statuses, we update it on the Thrizer portal so that clients feel supported through the process. The last thing is no reimbursement waits. And so typically, reimbursements can range from 4 to 6 weeks, depending on, whatever insurance plan you have. That's a lot of time, right? Like, let's say a client is going to their weekly therapy and they're paying, let's say, $200 out of pocket for their private pay clinician. That's $800 to almost $1,200 that you're going to be out of pocket before you even receive your first reimbursement check back, right? That is a lot of money to be able to have, cash on hand to support. And so what we say is just pay your out-of-pocket costs, right? We call it a copay, you can call it co-insurance. So, if you're paying $200 for a session and reimbursement's $150, with Thrizer, you just pay the $50 copay. So those are the three friction points that we found. And that's essentially what, Thrizer helps with.
Thanks for walking us through that. Comment here from Katie. Just want to give you the chance to address it and then want to move on here. It seems deductibles in out-of-network plans have been prohibitive for clients I've worked with. They might get a couple sessions in December reimbursed, but that's about it. How do you think about that with, these out-of-network deductibles being so high?
Yeah, no, that's a real problem, honestly. It comes down to kind of, is there a regular insurance plan or is it a high deductible insurance plan that the client has opted for? And so around open enrollment, it's important that, clients, if they are considering therapy, they find a plan that isn't high deductible if they do want to use their out-of-network benefits. But the average deductibles that we see is between 2,000 to 3,500 in a non-high deductible plan, right? So if a client has opted for a high deductible plan, it will be 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever it may be. But a lot of people like are within that sweet spot of 2 to 3.5. And that means that it won't be the first month or two or three, but at least halfway through the year, they're able to have met the deductible and are able to start paying kind of a reduced rate.
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit earlier. We're still navigating, right? With each of these models, we're still navigating within the existing system, right? So there's no perfect solution. Unfortunately, we're trying to kind of bend the system in a way, that is beneficial for both clients and therapists. But there's always going to be, something that is imperfect. And so I think it is important to address that. Thank you, folks who joined late. If you do have questions, drop them in the Q&A. I see one in there right now, which is great. If you drop questions in the Q&A, we'll save time at the end. We're about halfway through here, so moving along. But and then keep the chat going. It's great to hear from everyone. Megan, you touched on this earlier. What is a clinically integrated network, and how is Aaliyah helping to support therapists in that way?
Yeah, sure. So I have become quite a cynic in the mental health space. I've seen how, as investors get involved, therapists are usually the ones who get squeezed. And because insurance companies seem to be unsqueezable. So Aaliyah has an idea that I say is either going to change mental health care forever or, burn spectacularly, because there's no way that these companies are going to let this happen. So I know everyone's familiar with the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic is an example of a clinically integrated network. And a lot of people don't know this, but the Mayo Clinic gets significantly higher reimbursement rates for the same treatment that you get at a local hospital, because they have the reputation and the outcome data to prove that when you go get care at the Mayo Clinic, your care is really very excellent. And they make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. They have really strong social work support. They follow up with patients. They have their whole inward model that makes sure that when payers pay for something, they know that they're going to get the best care. They're not going to be paying for it again. So the idea behind Aaliyah is to set up a network like that so that therapists can also take advantage of the higher rates. When building a product, part of the problem is how do you get enough people to opt in to have a network to prove that the rates are good enough? And so the method that Aaliyah is using is, well, we're going to build a EHR that's AI enabled optionally, and it's going to be free forever. If you opt in, you can have your anonymized data evaluated to see how your outcomes are. And when I say outcomes, like most of the time, insurance payers are not actually looking at what we would consider to be real outcomes. They're looking at do your patients come back for 3 sessions? If there is some sort of emergency mental health event, do you follow up within a week? Those are the outcomes they're looking at. We don't have great outcome measurements in mental health. We all know that. And so through the free app, therapists will be able to opt in to see if their outcomes are good enough to meet the level that would be required to get those higher reimbursements. And then they would be invited to join to bill at that higher rate. If you don't meet the outcome data, or if you're not interested in sharing your anonymized data, you never have to share it. It's just kind of the method that they're using to see if they can make this model work for therapists as well.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to also say, we were talking about deductibles. I was just reading some news articles that it seems that the changes in the law for healthcare is going to make deductibles increase quite a bit. I think it's going to impact therapists quite a bit as well. I think I saw for some families, it's going to go up to $30,000 for a deductible. So it's going to be an interesting experiment if therapists now can't even increase access by being a part of insurance if they exit, because there are parity laws that require insurers to make sure that mental health is covered. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen when the game changes a little bit here pretty soon.
Thank you for explaining that. Paul, did you have something?
Well, the game changed already when they let the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act lapse in the new year. Our client numbers are exploding right now, and I think it's because of that.
It's always bothered me how it's framed that payers are doing therapists a favor by allowing them in the network, because really it's therapists who are doing payers the favor, because payers are required to make sure that mental health care is as accessible as physical health care is. So instead you guys take a rate cut and you do all the paperwork and you risk denial, and you don't even often get very many referrals. So I hope that if more therapists opt out, that the parity laws at some point will require payers to make it actually the other way around, where you guys are paid as if you're doing the insurance companies a favor, which you are.
Well, I do want to say this because it feels important to say. As a citizen, I have opinions about the insurance industry, and they're not very polite opinions, right? Most of us know the level of corruption and money grabbing that's going on, and it's despicable and also emblematic of so much of hypercapitalism, right? As a clinician, if I knew nothing at all about the insurance industry and I was basing my opinion only on what it's been like for me to be a provider for Blue Cross Blue Shield, I would say, this is actually pretty good. I started off probably getting reimbursed $90 back in 2014. Now I'm up to like 120, 125 a session. I have seen clients for years. I do long-term work with people weekly, never had to turn in a note. I know my experience isn't like everyone else's on insurance, right? I get it. But I've never had to turn in a note, never gotten audited in any kind of way. And my clients are paying, $20 copays for sessions. So the counterpoint is that it's not all a nightmare. My experience has been actually pretty positive working with
I
insurance
think if
companies.
that was the experience of most therapists, that this event would probably not even be occurring.
I agree. And also, it's important to realize that the people who are getting jammed up are the ones who are going to be most vocal about it. And those of us who are not are going to remain silent. I don't think I'm the only one out there. I think a lot of people probably have a similar experience as I'm having as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to say, like, I agree with that. There are definitely people, on LinkedIn and wherever, social platforms will say, "Hey, I feel very supported by insurance," right? And so that's why I think it comes down to your individual experience, right? If you try to navigate insurance and it doesn't work for you, then there are alternatives, right? If it works for you, then amazing, great. Specific to BCBS, and I put this in the chat. They are notoriously difficult to work with, even in the out of network setting, right? They are one of the only insurance companies that are asking for documentation now for out of network claims, which is unheard of and it doesn't happen very often. And so we have been seeing shifts even within good players, right? Like people who have been previously probably working fine. And I don't know if this is a trend for other companies or other insurance companies now. We'll start seeing this for Aetna, Cigna, blah, blah, blah. But I just wanted to call that out that we have been seeing kind of trending downwards for some of these insurance companies, I would say.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, Paul, and thanks, Sandra, for adding on just to, bring us back to the topic of this conversation, right? It's not should therapists take insurance or not. I think, Paul, you gave a, great response early on that it's really up to the therapist to do what they want to do. And like we shouldn't shame people if they don't take insurance or if they do take insurance. But I think what's helpful to understand is that there are alternative models and it's not necessarily one or the other either. Like you could take insurance and you could offer a sliding scale as well, right? And so there are options for there, and that's kind of our hope for this conversation is to share and let people know, hey, it's not just you take insurance or you don't take insurance. There's other options out there. I have two more questions here, and then I want to open it up to the live audience for Q&A. I saw some chatter in the chat about like we need to remember that as therapists, as private practice owners, we're running a business, right, at the end of the day. And I'm curious thoughts from the group here on like how do we think about balancing profitability and being a business owner with accessibility, and do we feel like both can coexist, or are they really at odds with each other? And as maybe as our private practice owner, Paul, I'll start with you.
Yeah, again, so I'm not a full-time private practitioner, so I'm also not the best representative sample here. But what I can say is that I take on two open path clients, and I take on a handful more insurance clients. And I told you what I get reimbursed for that. And then I take on a handful more of self-pay clients who charge me anywhere between 100 and 200, who I charge, Freudian slip, who I charge anywhere between 100 and 200 an hour. And when I combine all those together, it feels like, well, I can meet an accessibility need and I can get paid a wage that feels appropriate for me.
Sanjay, I know you've talked about this a little bit with, out of network billing, not sacrificing your income, but anything that you'd want to add to this question?
Yeah, no, I actually love what Paul you brought up around your kind of percentage split of your actual client base, right? And that's I think what we're actually talking about here, right? You can be credentialed with one insurance, you can offer a sliding scale, and you can be out of network and help clients use their out of network benefits, right? And you figure out the mix that makes sense for you based on your financial goals, based on what you need to run your life. So it's not even that you have to like pick one. It's that you find the right balance within the options that exist for you. So I love that framing.
Megan, anything to add?
No, I think they summed it up pretty well. It's I've heard therapists who in within the same city with different insurance companies, one company is offering them $65 and one person's offering them $115. And I think it's pretty clear that being able to say no to one and yes to the other is going to make the difference between being able to save up for college for your kids and the essentials that are perfectly valid reasons to make a living more than a living wage.
As we move forward, it's 2026. So in 5 years from now, I'm curious where you see this going. Is the industry trending more towards therapist moving away from insurance? Are therapists going to be um, taking insurance? Is it going to stay the same? I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts from the group on sort of what you think the future of this looks like. And maybe Paul, I'll start with you.
Things are changing so quickly right now. I couldn't predict what's going to happen 6 months from now, much less 5 years.
I think that's fair. Is that a consensus here? Someone asked this on LinkedIn, so I wanted to make sure that I asked that to the
I
group here.
think
Any sort of future predictions?
I think for me, this is what I think is a best case scenario, especially with AI coming in. My hope is that AI will not be used to replace therapists, but as a lower tier, like low level mental health support by companies that will then help clarify the higher needs and therefore reinforce the higher rates for the human therapists who are required to do actual clinical work and not just like self-care skills, which AI can say, have you tried this? I want you to try this just fine. And if the client says something like, I think I'm going to kill myself, can immediately reroute to a human therapist. That's my highest hopes for what can happen. And we don't have to catastrophize. So I won't say,
It's nice that you have high hopes.
Yeah, it is.
for a
Yeah,
living.
I was gonna add, Megan, my brain went straight to AI as well. AI, when used appropriately within companies, can actually help the mental health industry. And what I mean by that is if AI was used for operations, right? Like if AI was used within insurance companies, for example, to be able to predict better and have better data, if AI was used within big tech, if AI was used within even something like a small company like Thrizer, what that means is it's giving leverage to have more efficiency and charge less to people, right? It's like we can actually do more with our time and charge less fees, whatever it might be, to people so that they pay less. So technically, I feel like if AI was better implemented, rates should go down. But again, like if we're talking about AI therapists, then that is completely going to blow this whole system up, right? And that's what we don't want to happen. Um, I don't know which way it's going to go. It could go either way.
Paul, any thoughts on AI there as we think about the future, specifically of insurance and how people are paying for therapy?
Oh, I think AI therapy just sounds great.
Right. Yeah, I know that you do.
No, I don't have anything else to add. It's a perilous landscape right now, and I like Megan. I root for the angels of our better nature, but I am not so sure that's what's going to happen.
All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Q&A. We have about 15 minutes here, so we're right on time. Question about Thrizer, Sandra. This one looks like for you from Christine. Hope I'm saying that correctly. How is Thrizer making profit? Do therapists need to pay Thrizer to make it available to their clients?
Yeah, so the way that Thrizer works is we have fees for clinicians and we have fees for clients. So we are a payment platform. So you can think of us so much like a Stripe or a Square. So what clinicians are paying to use us is just the 3% credit card fee. So there's no other monthly fees. We offer you a free benefits widget that you can put on your website. All of the out-of-network billing stuff is offered as courtesy to your clients. You're really just using us as a payment platform. For the clients, on the other hand, there's kind of a pre-deductible and a post-deductible world. Pre-deductible, your sessions, your claims would be submitted to insurance automatically completely for free. So clients are not paying any money when they're having to work towards a deductible because they're not getting any reimbursements back. After they meet their deductible, they have two options. One is the I just want to pay my copay or co-insurance option. That's a 5% fee. And the other one is I'm okay kind of paying my clinicians full rate upfront and waiting for reimbursement similar to a super bill, but I want Thrizer to kind of take care of everything from an insurance perspective, and that's a 1% option. So we make money through these fees, and that's how we've kind of been able to stay in business. And it's more than enough for us to be able to operate our based on our margins. So I know we always get the question of, is it too good to be true? Like, no, we've intentionally not accepted VC funding because that is when it gets really hard, I think, right? That's when people start breathing down our backs. That's when people start, being like, hey, you're growing at 5% a year, but you should be growing at 50% a year. Like, no, sorry, we don't want to deal with any of that. So that's how we're able to stay in business.
Thank you for answering that. Question from Shruti. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I work in mental health tech and think a lot about between session care. Could shorter focus sessions at the same rate, supported by structured between session tools, preserve depth while improving economics and access? Or does that risk weakening the relational nature of therapy? Hey, Paul, I'll ask this
I
question
was
to
going to
you
say
as
this
someone who
question
does
has Paul's
long-term
name all over.
care.
Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I'm more of a traditionalist, and so I really I put the bulk of my faith in the therapeutic hour and what happens there, and then in the client's capacity to do the work with their own psyche and their own community in the week between, without too much involvement from the therapist. So I don't really get that involved with the sorts of modalities that Shruti's bringing up here.
That's just to clarify, that's kind of the in between session and kind of what the client is doing in between. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Great
I
question
think,
here from, oh, go ahead,
sorry,
Amber.
I just want to say I would be interested to see research on that. As far as I know, I wouldn't be surprised if these AI companies are already trying to run the research. I would probably wouldn't trust it from them, but I'm guessing that probably will have some academics also asking the question about their shorter sessions with like AI between session support have any impact on outcomes, and will help us figure out whether that is a viable solution for.
Question from Amber. Part of the problem with accessibility is the public doesn't know the different types of therapy and therapists available, what costs should be, what therapy even does, etc. How can we/systems better inform the public on the mental health care industry, available services, specialty types, and costs? How can we empower people rather than keeping them uninformed and all the burden on our shoulders as therapists?
I think that's a really good question. I don't really have an answer as much as I can commiserate. What we've learned with our website is the more information we put on there, the less people read. And certainly since the pandemic, there's such a proliferation of mental health companies and mental health information. I think it's probably very overwhelming for people.
I actually think this would be a really great use case for AI because I've I had a friend a few weeks ago ask me about a specific like problem they were facing and whether there was a specific type of therapy to do it, and I didn't know. So I asked AI, and it said, "Oh yeah, this is a modality for that. Here's the website. You can find who's trained in that." So I think it'll be interesting to see if we're able to better route people to therapists via AI rather than actually replace the therapist.
Yeah, and the one thing I'd add as a client, is that it's one of those things that you have to try to be able to get to understand the value of it. So it's really like our goal is to get people to go to their first therapy session, right? It's almost like let's make that our goal. And how do we make that our goal? And that is a tough question to answer, I would have to say. It's if you're in a social circle where people are talking about therapy and I love going to therapy and it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, someone is more inclined to try that first session. If you're in a community where it's the opposite, then it's going to require more, for you to be able to even go to that first session. So I agree with Paul. It is a tough problem, but I'm glad that we are talking about it, and I'm sure there's going to be other ways that we can continue to get the word out.
Christine asked, should accessibility really be the therapist's responsibility, or is that a collective systems responsibility? So that was actually the first topic that we discussed. So I would encourage you to go back and kind of rewatch that, unless, Paul, you have anything that you want to say to that maybe wasn't said earlier.
Yeah, I guess I didn't say this earlier. It feels like a both and. it's got to be all of our responsibility.
Yeah, I think the theme here today is kind of moving beyond this binary, right? Of like, there's only one option. It's yes or no, or it's insurance or not, or whose responsibility is it? Like, it's kind of a yes and is what I'm hearing. Said like a therapist. Bridget, this is more like a technical question about insurance, but maybe Paul, you could speak to this just very briefly. Um, as therapist business owners, can we cap the number of insurance clients that we accept? Like, can you say that I only want to accept a certain number of insurance clients and then the rest are, going to be out of network or self-pay?
Yeah, I'm going to fall back on how I led, which is that I'm not actually an expert in any of this, and not give technical opinions. But Sanjana, you might know something about that.
Yeah, I was sorry, I was multitasking. I was trying to answer the questions in the chat,
No,
but
no, that's okay. So,
go ahead, ask me that
yeah,
question.
just the question from Bridget here. It's a little bit more tactical about taking insurance, but can you cap the number of insurance clients that you kind of will accept on your caseload?
Um, yes and no. So again, this might not be the full answer, but let's say you are credentialed with, so you can be credentialed with X number of insurance companies, right? So if you are credentialed with Blue Cross Blue Shield, that doesn't mean that you can't see United clients private pay, right? You won't have a clause, I believe, in your Blue Cross that says because you're credentialed with Blue Cross Blue Shield clients, you have to only take Blue Cross Blue Shield clients, right? So you can absolutely accept clients in for insurances that you are out of network with, right? Now, if we're talking about, okay, if you're credentialed for Blue Cross Blue Shield through Alma or Headway, right? And that's more of a kind of a large group practice that has you credentialed under their tax ID, then technically you can actually even accept Blue Cross Blue Shield clients in a private pay capacity because you would be submitting claims or they would be submitting you as an NPI one. So this gets really complicated, but the point is, yes, there is no cap, right? It just depends on if you're individually credentialed with an insurance company, you cannot have you have to accept their rates. But for any other insurance companies, right, you can absolutely accept as many private pay clients as you'd like. So I think that answers the question.
Yeah, I would say also just check with your insurance company, right? Like if you have questions about your contract and your agreement with them, like I know insurance companies are notoriously hard to sort of get a hold of and you spend hours on the phone with, but you definitely make sure that if you are credentialed through an insurance that you're maintaining compliance and you're, not doing something that could get you in trouble. All right, Robert asked an interesting question here, and I know we're almost at the top of the hour. Folks might have sessions, so want to drop off a few minutes early. Recent changes in our field, referring to the new middleman between therapists and the insurance companies, is forcing lower hourly rates based on what the insurance companies pay. Um, I'm reading this maybe as kind of these middlemen being the large kind of networks like Alma, Headway, et cetera. Who is behind these middleman organizations? My guess is that the insurance industry has created them. Does anyone have any idea who's behind this creation? They have a lot of money and they sprang up out of nowhere. Megan, do you want to touch
I
on that?
would love to take this question.
Sure.
So I don't think it's it's not as conspiracy theory as that question makes it seem, but it is also kind of accurate. So I don't basically during the pandemic there was a huge increase in need in mental health, and venture capitalists are always looking for inefficient industries and systems where they can capture a lot of value at once and be the next Google or Uber or whatever. So that's where all the money came from. All of a sudden, there was an increased need, a lot more attention on mental health. Um, Investors looked around and saw therapists like at community mental health clinics getting paid almost nothing for work that was worth a lot more on the free market. Thought, oh, they're doing this because they don't know better and we can make money on it. Not really true. Therapists do know better. They do that for access because they care about their communities. I think that a lot of these companies are learning that now. And insurance companies aren't necessarily behind them, at least originally. It wasn't like a mustachioed insurance CEO who had this brilliant idea, but they are getting behind them in an attempt to make more dollars be spent on care, because that's what insurance companies exist for. There are some laws that changed about how much profit they could take based on how much they spent on actual care delivery or to take care of their members. Of course, in the natural flow of things, they said, well, then let's buy companies that deliver care so we can take profits from them as well. So yes, they have now built a lot of investment arms that are investing in companies like these. But at the same time, those companies are seeing they're getting squeezed by insurance companies as well. Originally, insurance companies were like, this is a great idea. This is going to solve our parity problem immediately. We'll give you higher rates so that we don't have to worry about getting sued by the federal government for these parity issues. It's going to save everyone. Unfortunately, they realized that increasing access means more people are going to access it, which means more people are going to need to get paid out for their sessions. And now they're doing more audits, they're doing more denials. It's getting harder for even those companies to stay sustainable. So everything's changing constantly. The answer to the question is basically yes and no.
Before we get off here, any closing thoughts, or is there anything that anyone didn't have the opportunity to share that they just wanted to create space for that? Awesome. Great. Well, thank you to our panelists, Megan, Paul, Sanjana. Really appreciate your time. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, who is watching the recording. We will send out the recording later this afternoon. We'll include information about the companies represented here as well, if you're interested in checking them out. And let us know if you want us to do more events like this. This was a lot of fun to put on. And if you have feedback or topics that you'd like to see discussed, definitely let us know. I think we're all on LinkedIn is probably the best way to connect with us. So we'd love to see you there. And with that, enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.